The funeral home smelled like cheap lilies and expensive lies, a combination that seemed to perfectly capture everything wrong with my life these days. I stood at the edge of the viewing room, my calloused hands still greasy from fixing the hearse's busted alternator, because apparently even in death, I'm the guy who fixes everyone else's problems while my own world falls apart around me. The irony wasn't lost on me. Here I was, Danny Jennings, former successful construction contractor turned part-time handyman and boxing coach, getting my hands dirty so Harold Whitmore could have a dignified send-off. Harold, who'd never worked a day of manual labor in his 78 years, would probably have appreciated the joke if he weren't currently occupying the mahogany casket at the front of the room. That's when I heard my wife Erin whispering to her best friend Jessica near the flower arrangements. Their voices carrying that particular tone women use when they think they're being discreet but actually sound like air horns in a library. "Was Dad gone, I can finally live," Erin hissed, her voice dripping with relief that made my stomach turn. No more pretending to be the dutiful daughter, no more pretending to be happy with mediocrity. Chad says I deserve everything, and more than that slob could ever give me. Jessica giggled like a teenager who just heard her first dirty joke. "Girl, you've been playing house with a loser for way too long. Time to upgrade to the premium model." Apparently, my wife inherited not only $18 million, but a brand new personality, one that hates my guts and isn't afraid to advertise it at her father's funeral. Let me paint you a picture of how far I've fallen. 2 years ago, I owned Jennings Construction, a decent-sized operation with 12 employees and contracts worth over $2 million annually. We built custom homes for the kind of people who worried about thread counts and wine pairings. Then the pandemic hit like a sledgehammer to the skull. Supply chains collapsed, projects got canceled, and my business went from profitable to bankrupt in 6 months. Now I coach boxing at Ray's Gym for $30 a day, and whatever dignity I can scrape together from the bottom of my pride. The gym smells like sweat and broken dreams, but at least it's honest about what it is. Unlike my marriage, which had apparently been a 23-year lie wrapped in wedding vows and mortgage payments. Erin's father, Harold Whitmore, had been old money, the kind that came with a lakeside mansion, vintage wine cellars, and the social standing my wife craved like a drug. When he died last week of a heart attack, everything changed overnight. Suddenly, my wife was worth more than most small towns, and I was the deadweight she'd been dragging around, waiting for the right moment to cut me loose. "Look at him over there," Erin continued, not bothering to lower her voice. "Danny looks absolutely pathetic in that cheap suit. I'm embarrassed to be seen with him. Chad's taking me to the yacht club tomorrow. Finally, a man who knows how to treat a woman properly." Jessica's response was a cackle that could have stripped paint. "Honey, you've been slumming it for too long. Time to remember what class looks like." I had heard enough. 23 years of marriage, 1 daughter, a mortgage we'd paid off together, and this is what it came down to. Gossip at her father's funeral, while his body was still warm. I started to leave when old Mr. Blanchard, Harold's estate lawyer, intercepted me near the door. "Mr. Jennings," he said, his voice carrying that particular authority that comes with handling dead people's money for 40 years. "Your father-in-law was an odd man, very specific about his final wishes. He left particular instructions regarding you." He handed me a weathered envelope, the kind of thick paper that screamed money and importance. "He said you'd know what to do with this when the time came." The envelope felt heavy, important, like it contained more than just paper. I shoved it into my jacket pocket as Erin's laughter echoed across the room. She was celebrating her father's death like it was New Year's Eve, and I was the hangover she couldn't wait to cure. Back home, though, I was beginning to suspect it wouldn't be my home much longer. I found the celebration in full swing. Erin, Jessica, and some guy I'd never seen before were drinking Harold's expensive champagne in our living room. Well, technically, Erin's living room now, along with everything else. The stranger was tall, tanned, wearing a watch that probably cost more than my truck, and had the kind of artificial confidence that comes from a trust fund and a gym membership. He looked like he'd stepped out of a cologne advertisement, all white teeth and perfect hair. "Danny!" Erin called out, her voice syrupy with fake affection that made my skin crawl. "Come meet Chad Morrison. He owns Morrison Luxury Motors downtown." She gestured toward the stranger with obvious pride. like she was showing off a prize poodle. Chad, this is my husband. He fixes things. The way she said it made my profession sound like a communicable disease. Chad extended a manicured hand that had never seen a day of real work. Nice to meet you, Dave. It's Danny. Right, sorry, Danny. Aaron tells me you're in construction? Was in construction. Now I coach boxing at Ray's gym. Chad's smile turned condescending. The kind of expression rich people wear when they're pretending to care about the help. Boxing, huh? That's still a thing? I mean, who watches boxing anymore? It's so primitive. Jessica snorted into her champagne glass. Chad, you're terrible. But honestly, who does watch boxing anymore? It's like being a professional blacksmith or something. They all laughed at that, including my wife. My wife of 23 years, laughing at a joke about my livelihood being obsolete. The sound cut through me like a rusty knife. I excused myself and headed to the garage, where I kept my tools and what remained of my self-respect. The envelope sat on my workbench like a loaded gun, waiting to explode my world in ways I couldn't imagine. Inside, I found 3 items that would change everything. A Swiss bank account number, a password written in Harold's shaky handwriting, and a note that made my hands tremble. For my son-in-law, whom I trust more than my own blood. She doesn't know about this account. I've been moving money here for years, waiting to see what kind of woman she'd become. I'm disappointed but not surprised. Use it when you're ready. You'll know when that is. The real will is with Blanchard. H.W. My hands shook as I logged into the bank's website using Harold's information. The balance that appeared on the screen made my vision blur. $4.2 million. Guess old Harold trusted the wrong guy, or maybe the right villain. From inside the house, I could hear them toasting again. To new beginnings, Chad's voice boomed, and to leaving the past where it belongs, in the garbage. More laughter, more champagne, more celebration of my impending destruction. But they didn't know about Harold's final gift. They didn't know that the old man had been watching, planning, preparing for this exact scenario. And they certainly didn't know that I was about to stop being the victim in this story and start being something much more dangerous. The hero of my own revenge. 3 weeks later, my life had officially become a country song written by someone with a psychology degree and a grudge against happiness. Erin had banished me to the guest bedroom, claiming she needed space to process her grief. The only thing she was processing was how quickly she could erase me from her new life without looking like a complete monster to our social circle. Our daughter Grace, 17 and sharp as her mother's tongue, had joined the campaign to make me invisible. At breakfast, she didn't look up from her phone, which seemed permanently attached to her hand like some kind of technological appendage. Mom, can you ask Dad to stop breathing so loud? It's seriously gross and I'm trying to eat. Grace, be nice to your father, Erin said without conviction, not even looking up from her own phone. He's trying his best. His best sucks, Grace muttered, then looked directly at me with eyes that held none of the warmth I remembered from her childhood. Seriously, when are you moving out? Mom deserves better than this. I'm not moving anywhere, kiddo. This is my home too. Not really, Grace said with the casual cruelty that teenagers had perfected into an art form. Mom owns everything now. You're just here. The words hit harder than any punch I'd ever taken in the ring. My own daughter, the little girl I'd taught to ride a bike and helped with homework for 16 years, was looking at me like I was a problem to be solved. That afternoon, while Erin was at another grief counseling session, which I was beginning to suspect involved more alcohol than therapy, I decided to do some investigating of my own. Her car was in the driveway, and something about the way she'd been guarding her purse lately made my instincts twitch. I found Erin's second phone hidden in her car's glove compartment, tucked behind the registration papers like a dirty secret. The text messages I discovered painted a picture that would make a divorce lawyer weep with joy and bill by the hour. Chad, can't wait to get you alone on the boat tonight. Your husband won't even notice you're gone. Does he ever notice anything? Erin, he's too busy feeling sorry for himself to pay attention to anything else. I told him I was having dinner with Jessica to discuss Dad's estate. Chad, when are you going to dump the deadweight? You're worth millions now. You could have any man you want. Erin, soon. I need to figure out the legal stuff first. I don't want him getting half of Dad's money in the divorce. He doesn't deserve a penny. A woman like you shouldn't have to settle for a glorified janitor. You deserve champagne, not beer. Tell me about it. I can't believe I wasted 23 years on someone so ordinary. The photos were worse than the words. Aaron and Chad on his yacht, at expensive restaurants I'd never heard of, in hotel rooms that cost more per night than I made in a week. My wife of 23 years, playing dress-up with a car salesman who probably spent more on hair gel than I made in a month. Each image was a knife twist, showing me a version of my wife I'd never seen. She looked happy, carefree, younger somehow. Like being with Chad had stripped away years of disappointment and revealed the woman she'd always wanted to be. The woman she apparently couldn't be with me. I called my buddy Ray, who owned the boxing gym, and doubled as the closest thing I had to a therapist. Ray had been a cop for 20 years before buying the gym, and he still had the instincts of someone who'd seen every kind of human ugliness imaginable. You need to document everything, Ray said, sliding a beer across the bar in his office. Photos, texts, bank records, hotel receipts. Build a case like you're going to trial. What am I supposed to do with documentation? She's got millions now and lawyers on speed dial. I've got $30 a day and a law degree from the School of Hard Knocks. You'd be surprised what money can't fix, Ray said, his eyes getting that look he got when he was thinking like the cop he used to be. Rich people get sloppy because they think money makes them untouchable. They make mistakes, leave trails, trust the wrong people. Like who? Like car salesmen who think they're smarter than they are. This Chad guy, I know his type. All flash, no substance. Guys like that always have skeletons in their closets. That night, I followed Aaron and Chad to the Riverside Hotel, a place that charged $300 a night for the privilege of pretending you were more important than you actually were. While they were busy ruining my marriage in room 247, I was busy ruining Chad's prize. The hotel's security camera mysteriously malfunctioned that night, its lens somehow getting covered with black spray paint. Ray's connections in the police department still came in handy, even in retirement. 2 days later, Chad's car reeked so bad he had to have it towed to 3 different shops before anyone would work on it. The repair bill was $15,000, and the smell never completely went away. Aaron was furious, convinced it was random vandalism targeting expensive cars. I agreed completely. Terrible what people do to nice cars these days. Crime was really getting out of hand. The yacht club party was my public execution, though I didn't realize it at the time. Aaron insisted I attend as her +1, which felt about as genuine as Chad's spray tan and twice as humiliating. The crowd was everything I wasn't. Educated, connected, and comfortable with spending more on a single dinner than most people made in a week. The yacht club itself was a monument to wealth and exclusion, all white columns and brass fittings, with a view of the harbor that probably cost more to maintain than most people's houses. Everyone was dressed like they were auditioning for a commercial about successful living, and I felt like a smudge on an otherwise perfect picture. "So, Danny," said some woman whose jewelry could have funded a small army, "what is it that you do for work?" "I coach boxing at Ray's gym downtown." "Oh." Her smile died like she'd just been told about a terminal diagnosis. "How interesting. That must be very fulfilling." The way she said fulfilling made it sound like a euphemism for unemployed. Chad appeared beside Aaron, his arm possessively around her waist in a gesture that made my jaw clench. "Boxing coach? Is that even a real job anymore? I mean, when's the last time anyone actually cared about boxing?" The crowd laughed, that polite laughter rich people use when they want to seem inclusive, while actually being cruel. Aaron didn't defend me. She didn't change the subject. She laughed too, and that sound cut through me like a chainsaw. "I mean," Chad continued, encouraged by his audience and my wife's approval, "it's like being a professional telegraph operator or a buggy whip manufacturer. Quaint, but completely irrelevant." More laughter. Jessica raised her champagne glass, the crystal catching the light like a weapon. "To evolution. Out with the old, in with the new. Some people adapt, and some people don't." She looked directly at me when she said it, her smile sharp enough to cut glass. I excused myself to the bathroom and made a phone call to a contact Ray had given me. someone who specialized in digital problem solving. Within an hour, Erin's drunken videos from the party were making the rounds on social media. The footage was damning. Her grinding against Chad on the dance floor, her slurred speech about finally dumping the dead weight, her detailed complaints about her pathetic husband who smells like sweat and failure. All of it captured in high-definition clarity and uploaded to her law firm's internal chat system. Monday morning, Erin's career hit its first major speed bump. Her senior partners weren't amused by their associates' public display of unprofessional behavior, especially when it started affecting the firm's reputation with their more conservative clients. "Danny, did you have anything to do with those videos?" Erin asked me that night, her eyes red from crying and her voice hoarse from what I assumed was a very unpleasant conversation with her boss. "What videos?" I asked, not looking up from my dinner. "You know what videos, the ones from the yacht club party. Someone recorded me and sent them to everyone at work." "Honey," I said, finally meeting her eyes, "if you don't want people to see you acting like trash, maybe don't act like trash in public." She stared at me for a long moment, and I saw something flicker across her face, maybe the first hint that her husband wasn't going to roll over and die quietly. But she wasn't ready to back down yet. Neither was I. The war was just getting started. By month 2 of my new reality, I'd stopped pretending to be the good guy. Erin wanted a villain in her story. I'd give her one worth the price of admission, with special effects and a soundtrack that would make her ears bleed. The Swiss account became my war chest. I hired Marcus Webb, a private investigator who specialized in what he called reputation archaeology, digging up the past that people preferred to keep buried 6 feet under with a concrete slab on top. Marcus was a thin, nervous man who looked like he lived on coffee and conspiracy theories, but Ray vouched for his work. "He found out my ex-wife was hiding assets in 3 different states," Ray had told me. "Guy's like a bloodhound, but for financial records and dirty secrets." Marcus was thorough, methodical, and expensive. Within 2 weeks, he'd uncovered enough dirt on Chad and Jessica to bury them both in separate graves. Chad's business practices were a masterclass in fraud that somehow stayed just barely on the legal side of the line. Odometer rollbacks on luxury cars, fake vehicle histories, inflated insurance claims, and a disturbing pattern of targeting recently widowed women with more money than automotive knowledge. He'd built his entire business on the grief and vulnerability of others. "This guy's a predator," Marcus explained, spreading photographs and documents across my kitchen table like evidence in a murder trial. "He finds women who've just lost their husbands, offers them deals on luxury cars they don't need, and overcharges them by 30 to 40%. Then he uses the profits to fund his lifestyle." Jessica's criminal past was even more interesting. A fraud conviction from 2018 that she'd somehow kept hidden from Erin's social circle, involving a charity scam that had stolen money intended for cancer research. She'd served 18 months in minimum security and had been required to pay restitution that she'd never actually paid. "She's been using fake names and false references to infiltrate social groups," Marcus continued. "Your wife's circle isn't the first group of wealthy women she's targeted. She identifies the most vulnerable member of the group, becomes their best friend, then manipulates them into making decisions that benefit her." The boxing gym became my fortress and my training ground. I worked out obsessively, turning my rage into muscle and my humiliation into strategy. The heavy bag became Chad's face, the speed bag became Jessica's laugh, and the weights became all the years I'd wasted being the nice guy. Ray watched me work with the eye of someone who'd seen men transform themselves before. "You're planning something big," he said one evening as I finished my 3rd hour on the bags. "I can tell by the way you're training. This isn't exercise anymore. This is preparation." "Just getting in shape," I replied, unwrapping my hands and examining the calluses that had formed over weeks of punishment. "For what?" "The fight of my life." The charity boxing gala was perfect, a gathering of everyone who mattered in our little social ecosystem, all dressed up and pretending to care about underprivileged youth while writing tax-deductible checks. Chad attended as Erin's date, strutting around in a tuxedo that probably cost more than my truck, making jokes about real athletes versus has-beens who teach kids to hit things. He was holding court near the bar, regaling a group of admirers with stories about his latest car sales and his plans to upgrade his social circle. The way he kept glancing at Aaron and smirking made my hands itch for violence. The thing about boxing, Chad was saying, his voice carrying that particular arrogance that comes from never being punched in the mouth, is that it's a sport for people who can't make it in real athletics. I mean, what kind of skill does it take to hit someone? Any idiot can throw a punch. The crowd laughed, and I noticed several of them looking in my direction to see how I'd react. This was entertainment for them, watching the lower-class husband get humiliated by his wife's new boyfriend. During the intermission, I cornered Chad in the locker room. No witnesses, no cameras, just two men having a conversation about respect and consequences. "Chad, right?" I said, slamming my locker shut hard enough to make him jump and spill his drink. "We need to talk." "About what?" He tried to maintain his confident facade, but I could see the nervousness in his eyes. Up close, without his audience, he looked smaller, softer, like expensive wrapping paper around a cheap present. "About boundaries, about respect, about the fact that you're screwing my wife and making jokes about my profession." I stepped closer, and Chad instinctively backed against the wall. "See, I know about the hotels, the yacht, the cute little texts about dumping the deadweight." His face went pale, and his carefully styled hair suddenly looked wilted. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Sure you do. You know exactly what I'm talking about." I grabbed his wrist, not hard enough to break anything, but hard enough to make my point, and pressed it against the metal locker. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to show my wife some respect. You're going to stop making jokes about me and my work. And you're going to remember that some of us learn how to solve problems with our hands." "You're threatening me?" His voice cracked like a teenager's. "I'm educating you," I replied, releasing his wrist and straightening his expensive tie with mock gentleness. "If you can't take the heat, don't dip your wick in someone else's wife. And if you ever make another joke about boxing being for idiots, I'll be happy to demonstrate just how much skill it actually takes." Chad stumbled out of the locker room, his confidence evaporating like cheap cologne in the rain. For the rest of the evening, he avoided me completely and kept his mouth shut about combat sports. The next week, anonymous tips started reaching Chad's customers. Detailed information about his business practices, complete with documentation and photographs. Tips about odometer fraud, about his targeting of vulnerable women, about insurance scams and inflated prices. His dealership's reputation crumbled faster than a house of cards in a hurricane. Within 10 days, 3 major lawsuits had been filed against Morrison Luxury Motors. The state attorney general's office opened an investigation. His insurance company dropped him, and his fancy showroom started looking very empty as customers canceled orders and demanded refunds. Jessica's socialite friends received their own anonymous package. High-resolution photographs of her with City Councilman Robert Hayes, a married man with 3 kids and a campaign built on family values. The photos showed them in compromising positions at a downtown hotel, complete with timestamps and credit card receipts. The scandal destroyed both their reputations overnight. Hayes resigned from the city council, and Jessica found herself persona non grata at every country club and charity function in town. Her carefully constructed social identity collapsed like a controlled demolition. But my masterpiece was still coming because Marcus had uncovered the truth about Jessica's real role in my marriage's destruction. She wasn't just Aaron's friend. She was the puppet master pulling all the strings, and her motivations went back much further than anyone realized. 7 years ago, at our annual Christmas party, Jessica had made a pass at me. She'd cornered me in the kitchen while Aaron was busy hosting, pressed herself against me, and whispered suggestions that would have made a sailor blush. I'd turned her down gently but firmly, telling her I was flattered but happily married. Apparently, she'd been nursing that rejection ever since, waiting for the perfect opportunity for revenge. When Harold died and Aaron inherited millions, Jessica saw her chance to destroy my marriage while positioning herself as the loyal friend helping Aaron find happiness. She'd introduced Chad to Aaron at a carefully orchestrated chance meeting at the country club. She'd encouraged the affair, providing alibis and opportunities. She'd been whispering poison in my wife's ear for months, convincing her that I was holding her back, that she deserved better, that I was only interested in her newfound wealth. Even Grace's sudden hostility toward me could be traced back to Jessica's influence. She'd been filling my daughter's head with stories about how I was using her mother, how I was jealous of their success, how I was too proud to admit I was a failure. The puppet master was about to have her strings cut, and the show she'd been directing was about to become a tragedy with her as the star. But first, I had one more surprise to arrange. Because Harold's real will, the one Jessica and Chad didn't know about, contained a clause that would change everything. And I was finally ready to play that card. I invited them all to the lakeside estate for what I called a family mediation session, a chance to air our grievances and hopefully find a path forward that didn't involve lawyers, public humiliation, or me burning down everything they'd built together. At least that's what I told them. The truth was considerably more theatrical. Aaron, Chad, Jessica, and Grace all gathered in Harold's old study on a rainy Thursday evening, surrounded by books none of them had ever read and family portraits of people they'd never respected. The room smelled like leather and old money, with hints of the expensive whiskey Harold used to drink while complaining about the younger generation's lack of character. What they didn't know was that I'd spent the previous week learning everything about Harold's smart home system. The old man had been paranoid about security, installing cameras in every room, electronic locks on every door, and a central control system that could be operated remotely from a single laptop. He'd also been more technologically savvy than anyone realized, recording conversations and documenting behavior with the thoroughness of a federal investigator. His files were extensive, detailed, and absolutely devastating. "I think it's time we all put our cards on the table," I announced, setting my laptop on Harold's massive oak desk and opening the first folder. "This family has been living on lies for too long." "Danny, what's this about?" Erin asked, though her nervous glance at Chad suggested she had some idea. "If this is about the divorce, we should be having this conversation with lawyers present." "Oh, we'll get to the divorce. But first, let's talk about honesty, something this family seems to have forgotten how to practice." I clicked the button, and the room's smart TV flickered to life, displaying Chad's text messages in high definition. "Let's start with these." Grace's mouth fell open as she read her mother's explicit messages, her face cycling through confusion, disgust, and something that might have been shame. Chad looked like he wanted to disappear into the expensive Persian carpet. Jessica tried to leave, but the electronic locks had already engaged with a soft click that echoed through the room like a gunshot. "Sit down, Jess," I said without looking at her. "We're just getting started, and you're the star of tonight's show." The next screen showed Jessica's criminal record in all its glory. Mugshots, court documents, victim impact statements from the cancer patients whose donations she'd stolen. Then her photos with the married councilman, complete with hotel receipts and timestamps. Then a detailed timeline of her manipulation campaign against me, complete with witness statements and recorded phone calls. "You see, everyone thought I was the problem," I continued, my voice steady despite the rage burning in my chest like acid. The dead weight holding Erin back from her true potential. The jealous husband who couldn't handle his wife's success. But the real problem was Jessica, playing puppet master with all our lives for 7 years. "This is illegal!" Jessica shrieked, her carefully maintained composure finally cracking. "You can't keep us here! This is kidnapping!" "Actually, I can keep you here. This is private property, and you're all here voluntarily. You can leave anytime you want, after we finish our conversation." I clicked another button, and a small red light appeared on the TV screen. "But don't worry about missing anything. I'm sharing this family moment with the world. Your social circles are watching right now." The live stream had already attracted over 300 viewers, and the number was climbing rapidly as word spread through social media. I could see the chat exploding with comments as our local gossip network went into overdrive. Erin's face went white as she realized her law firm colleagues, her country club friends, her professional network, and probably half the town were all witnessing her public humiliation in real time. "Dad, please stop this," Grace pleaded. And for the first time in months, she sounded like my little girl again instead of a teenager who'd been poisoned against me. "This is insane." "No, kiddo. This is justice. There's a difference." I stood up and walked to the window overlooking the lake, where Harold used to stand every morning with his coffee and his disappointment in the world. "Your grandfather was a smart man, smarter than any of us gave him credit for. He knew exactly what kind of person your mother was becoming, and he prepared for this exact scenario." I pulled out Harold's real will, not the simplified version Erin's lawyers had read to establish her inheritance. But the complete document Harold had filed privately just weeks before his death, the one that included what lawyers call a morality clause. It turns out Harold didn't trust his daughter's judgment when it came to marriage or money, so he included a provision that if Erin violated her marriage vows through adultery, the entire inheritance would revert to me. The house, the money, the cars, the investments, everything. I turned back to face them, savoring the moment. Congratulations, sweetheart. You just gave me $18 million. Chad tried to rush me then, probably thinking he could intimidate me the way he intimidated his elderly customers. But 20 years of boxing training doesn't disappear overnight, and rage is an excellent motivator. I sidestepped his clumsy attack and put him on the floor with a single uppercut to the solar plexus. He lay there gasping like a fish while I continued my presentation, stepping over his writhing form like he was a piece of furniture. The best part is that all of this is perfectly legal. Harold's lawyers confirmed it this morning. The morality clause is ironclad. The evidence of adultery is overwhelming, and the transfer of assets will be completed by the end of the week. The live stream had attracted over 1,000 viewers now. Local news stations were starting to pick up the story. The chat was exploding with comments as our small town's biggest scandal in decades played out in real time. Erin's reputation, Jessica's social standing, and Chad's business were all burning simultaneously, and I was the one holding the matches. But wait, I said, channeling every infomercial I'd ever seen. There's more. I clicked to the final folder, the one that contained Harold's personal files on each of them. Years of recorded conversations, documented lies, financial irregularities, and personal betrayals. Everything he'd observed and cataloged while pretending to be a harmless old man who didn't understand modern technology. Harold recorded everything. Every conversation in this house, every phone call, every private moment when you thought no one was listening. He documented Jessica's manipulation, Chad's business fraud, and Erin's gradual transformation from the woman I married into someone I don't even recognize. The files were extensive and damning. Jessica's pattern of targeting wealthy families, her history of fraud and manipulation, her systematic destruction of relationships for personal gain, Chad's business practices, his history of targeting vulnerable women, his complete lack of genuine emotion or connection with anyone, and Erin's slow descent into cruelty, her willingness to abandon her family for money and status, her participation in Jessica's campaign to destroy me. The thing is, I continued, unlocking the doors and stepping aside, I don't actually want Harold's money. I never did. I just wanted you all to understand that actions have consequences, and choices matter. As they stumbled toward the exit, Chad still wheezing, Jessica crying, Erin staring at me like she'd never seen me before, I delivered my final line. You're all free to go, but remember this moment. Remember that the man you all dismissed as a failure, as dead weight, as someone beneath your notice, just destroyed your entire world without breaking a single law. As they reached the door, Erin turned back one last time, her eyes filled with something that might have been regret. You planned this whole thing, she said. No, I replied. I just finished what you started. The live stream ended, but the consequences were just beginning. The town's annual charity auction was held at the Civic Center 3 weeks later, a gathering of everyone who mattered in our little corner of New England. It was also the perfect venue for my final act, the crescendo of a symphony I'd been composing for months. I'd purchased a booth and arranged to address the crowd during the intermission. What they expected was a brief thank you speech from a local boxing coach who'd somehow come into money. What they got was a masterclass in public destruction that would be talked about for decades. The Civic Center was packed beyond capacity, with people standing in the aisles and crowding around the doors. Word had spread about the Lakeside incident, as the local newspaper had dubbed it, and everyone wanted to see what would happen next in our town's biggest scandal since the mayor's wife ran off with the fire chief. Good evening, everyone, I began, my voice carrying easily across the packed auditorium. My name is Danny Jennings, and I have a story to tell you about friendship, betrayal, and the price we pay for forgetting who we really are. The crowd settled in immediately, sensing drama like sharks smelling blood in the water. In the front row, I spotted Aaron, Chad, and Jessica, who'd apparently decided to brazen it out rather than hide in shame. They sat together but apart, like strangers forced to share a lifeboat. 3 months ago, my father-in-law Harold Whitmore died, leaving his daughter a considerable inheritance. What he also left was a letter, sealed with his will, which I'd like to read to you now. I pulled out Harold's final message, the one that had been locked away with his lawyers until this moment. To the people of this town, my daughter Erin has always been selfish, but I hoped marriage and motherhood would change her. They didn't. She spent the last several years planning to abandon her husband the moment she inherited my money, and she's enlisted her friends in a campaign of cruelty that would shame the devil himself. But I've ensured that her betrayal will cost her everything she values, because some things matter more than money, like loyalty, honor, and keeping your word to the people who love you. The auditorium was silent except for the sound of people shifting in their seats and the occasional cough. I continued, my voice growing stronger with each word. Harold included what's called a morality clause in his will. If Erin violated her marriage vows through adultery, everything would transfer to me. The house, the accounts, the cars, the investments, all $18 million of it. I looked directly at my wife, who was staring at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. She violated those vows with Chad Morrison, aided and encouraged by Jessica Phillips, who orchestrated the entire affair as revenge for a personal slight that happened 7 years ago. Chad stood up, his face red with rage and embarrassment. This is slander. I'll sue you for every penny you stole. With what money? I replied calmly, enjoying the moment more than I probably should have. Your business is bankrupt, your reputation is destroyed, and the IRS is auditing your tax returns as we speak. Sit down before you embarrass yourself further. He sat down, deflated like a punctured balloon. Jessica tried next, her voice shrill with desperation. This is all lies. Danny's having some kind of mental breakdown. He's obsessed with revenge. The evidence is publicly available, I said, gesturing to the screens around the auditorium that were displaying documents, photos, and recorded conversations. Photos, text messages, bank records, witness statements, court documents. Feel free to verify any of it. I'll wait. The crowd was murmuring now, phones coming out as people started Googling the scandal that had been unfolding in their backyard. The local news crews were recording everything, and I could see reporters frantically taking notes. But here's the part that might interest all of you, I continued, raising my voice to be heard over the growing buzz of conversation. Harold left specific instructions for his money. Since Erin forfeited her inheritance through adultery, and since I have no interest in keeping wealth I didn't earn through my own work, I'm donating the entire $18 million to local charities. The murmur became a roar that shook the building. $18 million was more money than most of these organizations had ever dreamed of receiving, enough to transform our entire community. The Youth Center will receive $5 million for new facilities and expanded programs. The hospital gets $5 million for equipment and facility expansion. The remaining $8 million will be split equally among the food bank, the homeless shelter, the animal rescue, and the volunteer fire department. The applause was thunderous, a wall of sound that seemed to go on forever. I had to raise my voice to be heard over it, and even then, people in the back were straining to listen. There's just one condition attached to these donations. None of this money can ever be used to benefit Erin Whitmore, Chad Morrison, or Jessica Phillips in any way, shape, or form. They made their choices, and choices have consequences that can't be bought or negotiated away. Erin was crying now, the reality of her situation finally penetrating the bubble of denial she'd been living in. She'd gambled everything on an affair with a car salesman and lost not just her marriage, but her fortune, her reputation, her social standing, and her future. Chad made one last desperate play, rushing the stage like he was storming a castle. He swung wildly at me, telegraphing his punch so obviously that I had time to dodge, counter, and deliver a right cross that dropped him like a sack of cement. The crowd cheered as security guards dragged his unconscious form away. Ladies and gentlemen, I said, straightening my tie and smoothing down my hair, sometimes the good guy wins after all. Sometimes justice isn't about revenge. It's about making sure the right people benefit from the choices we make. As I left the stage, I passed Erin in the aisle. She grabbed my arm with both hands, her eyes desperate and wild. "Danny, please, we can work this out. I made mistakes, terrible mistakes, but we can fix this. We can go to counseling, start over, make it work like it used to." I looked at her for a long moment. This woman I'd loved for over 2 decades, who'd thrown it all away for money and social status, and the attention of a man who'd never really cared about her as anything more than a conquest. "You're right about one thing," I said finally, gently removing her hands from my arm. "You did make mistakes. But some things, once broken, stay broken forever. Some betrayals can't be forgiven, and some choices can't be undone." I walked out of the Civic Center into the cool night air, leaving behind 23 years of marriage and starting over with nothing but my integrity intact and the knowledge that I'd done the right thing, even when it was the hardest thing. Behind me, I could hear the crowd still talking, still processing the drama they'd just witnessed. My phone was already buzzing with calls from reporters, lawyers, and charity organizations. But I ignored them all. Grace was waiting for me in the parking lot, leaning against my truck with tears streaming down her face. "Dad, I'm so sorry," she said, throwing her arms around me. "I was wrong about everything. Jessica told me so many lies, and I believed them because I was angry about the divorce, and I wanted someone to blame." I hugged her tight, feeling like I'd gotten the only thing that really mattered back. "It's okay, kiddo. You're 17. You're supposed to make mistakes and believe the wrong people sometimes. That's how you learn to recognize the right ones. Can we start over? Can you forgive me for being such a brat?" "There's nothing to forgive. You're my daughter and I love you no matter what. That never changed, not even when you were breaking my heart." As we drove home to my small apartment above Ray's boxing gym, I reflected on Harold's final wisdom. He'd been right about his daughter, right about the importance of character over wealth, and right about trusting me with his legacy. The money would do genuine good in the community, helping people who actually needed it, rather than funding the lifestyle of people who'd forgotten what really mattered. Erin, Chad, and Jessica would have to live with the consequences of their choices. And maybe, just maybe, they'd learn something from the experience. And I would rebuild my life, one day at a time, one honest decision after another, with my daughter by my side and my conscience clear. Grace showed up at the gym the next morning, her eyes still red from crying, but her jaw set with determination that reminded me of her mother at her best. "Teach me," she said simply, pulling on a pair of boxing gloves. I handed her the hand wraps and showed her how to protect her wrists. "First lesson, never start a fight you're not prepared to finish." She nodded and stepped up to the heavy bag. "What's the second lesson?" "The second lesson is that sometimes the person you're really fighting is yourself, and that's the hardest opponent you'll ever face." We worked out together for 2 hours, father and daughter rebuilding their relationship one punch at a time. It wasn't going to be easy. We had years of damage to repair, trust to rebuild, and a future to figure out together. But for the first time in months, I felt like we had all the time in the world. Sometimes the villain wins. But sometimes, if you're very lucky and very careful, you discover that you are never the villain at all. You are just the hero of a story that nobody else knew how to read.